What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you'll consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So, first off, I want to apologize for the lateness of this video. For those of you who were maybe expecting this video to drop a couple of days ago, but we had 4th of July this week and I had to host some family, and I've been feeling a bit under the weather the last few days, so there's that. But in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down the 3rd episode in season 2 of HBO's hit TV show House of the Dragon. And just so you guys know, this video will contain spoilers, so if you haven't gotten around to watching the episode yet and you don't want to know anything that happens in it, you might want to exit this video now. And with that being said, no more wasting time. Let's get into it. So, the episode begins in the Riverlands with a skirmish between the Brackens and the Blackwoods over the location of boundary stones. I suppose somebody was moving them around. But then it devolves into an argument about the fact that the two neighboring houses are on opposite sides of the greater conflict in Westeros over the succession, and how they each despise the other, swearing allegiance to the monarch of their choice. And just like that, what started as an argument over land turned into a full-on battle, thought of by some to be the actual first true battle, in fact, between the Greens and the Blacks, the battle that would be referred to as the Battle of the Burning Mill. Now, we've seen as far back as the 4th episode last season that the Brackens and the Blackwoods just plain don't like each other. When Willem Blackwood slayed Gerald Bracken in a duel at Storm's End in Rhaenyra's presence while she was interviewing suitors. So I like the fact that we finally get to see just how deep the hatred between these two houses goes. And even though we don't actually get to see a pitched battle take place here, I did like the episode starting this way. Next, we go to Dragonstone, and we see the Cargo twins buried together, which I thought was interesting, seeing as how one was a protector of Rhaenyra and the other was sent to murder her. But as Rhaenyra, Jacaerys, and Rhaenys and other members of the Queensguard stand in reverence, Rhaenys raises the point that Otto Hightower would have never allowed such a thing to happen, which, I'm sorry, but I think that's complete cap. Because remember, Otto was fully prepared to have Rhaenyra put down back in episode 9 of season 1 in order to prevent challenge to Aegon's succession. It was Alicent who prevented that order from being executed. So while I do think that Otto had little belief in the efficacy of the mission when he learned of it, I don't think he would have had an issue with Rhaenyra's murder at all. But Rhaenys goes on to tell Rhaenyra that she fears that hotter blood has prevailed in King's Landing, and that the young men have taken the bit in their teeth that they wish to punish and avenge, and that soon they will not even remember what it was that started the war in the first place. Now, Rhaenyra smugly remarks that the war started when they usurped her throne. But Rhaenys reminds her that the war may have started when Jaehaerys was beheaded, or when Lucerys was killed, or when Aemon's eye was taken. She tells Rhaenyra that they are reaching a point where none of it will matter, and the desire to kill and burn will take hold, and reason will be forgotten. But she then tells Rhaenyra that there may be another way before naming Alicent Hightower. Now, Rhaenyra tells Rhaenys that when they last saw each other, Alicent remarked that she would make a fine queen. And then she tells Rhaenys to look at all that has happened since then. Rhaenys tells Rhaenyra that Alicent came to her after Viserys' death, and that she knows that war is coming, and that it will be savage beyond all compare. And then Rhaenys advises Rhaenyra that there is no war so hateful as a war between kin, and no war so bloody as a war between dragons. She tells Rhaenyra that she doesn't believe Alicent wants a war. Rhaenyra tells Rhaenys that Alicent sent a raven, but that she has not cared to read the message. Rhaenys tells Rhaenyra that it's the men around Alicent who seek bloodshed. Rhaenyra reminds Rhaenys that Alicent may not have killed Luke, but that she permitted it. And, Rhaenys reminds Rhaenyra that she is not so different, having permitted the murder of a little boy in his bed, meaning Jaehaerys. And finally, Rhaenyra reminds Rhaenys that Alicent sits in King's Landing and that her son sits her throne, before telling Rhaenys that there is nothing more to be said. And see, this is what I mean when I say the writers have done Rhaenyra no favors in this show. Because they paint her as indecisive at the very least. Do you want to go to war or not? When Rhaenyra found out about Luke's death, she was hot. Then she was depressed, leaving her temporary seat on Dragonstone to go and mourn him, or find his body, maybe both. Then she demanded the head of her half-brother Aemon, but got her nephew's head by accident, or instead, depending on how you want to look at it. So next we see Sir Criston Cole, newly minted Hand of the King, in his quarters, leaning over the chair, seemingly deep in thought, probably a bit nervous, until a servant comes and gets him, telling him that the army is waiting for him. And from there, we see Sir Criston make his way through the castle, and he runs into what looks like new Kingsguardsmen, basically sitting down on the job. And these men look like, Aegon's drinking buddies. So apparently he's just, inducted all his homeboys into the frat. When they see him, they stand up, and once they do, Sir Criston continues on to the small council chamber, but it's clear he's not impressed with the new recruits. And I guess this is just to show us that the new Kingsguardmen are not like the old Kingsguardsmen. The writers are setting our expectations for what these men should be capable of, I'm sure, for a later scene wherein their incompetence will no doubt be on full display. So Sir Criston arrives at the small council meeting late, as he apologizes for being so. He asks Aegon about the new knights he has appointed. Aegon tells him that they are to replace the knights they lost. Lord Jasper Weil remarks that one knight was lost needlessly, of course, referring to Sir Eric Cargill with an A. Sir Criston defends his decision by stating that Sir Eric was awarded the great duty of ending Rhaenyra's challenge, but that he failed. Alicent remarks that he failed because the scheme itself was rash. Sir Criston then tells Alicent that they cannot all hide in their castles and wait for the war to come to them. Alicent remarks that after Sir Criston's scheme, it surely will, before Aemon interjects, stating that it already has because of the Brackens' attack on the Blackwoods. Aegon remarks that he is glad of it and that the first blood of the war is in their name. Now, Lord Tywin Lannister informs the king that both sides took heavy losses and that he is not sure that either side can claim victory in such a case. Lord Jasper then claims that the Brackens and the Blackwoods have feuded for centuries, and that that should not be considered the beginning of hostilities between the Greens and the Blacks. Aegon tells him that he calls it war, and that so will Dragonstone. He then asks the council what they plan to do about it. Now, Grand Maester Orwell suggests that a raven be sent to Lord Grover Tully in the Riverlands, demanding that he control his vassals. Lord Weil explains that Lord Tully is a flaccid old fool who is not likely to be able to control anyone or anything. Okay, so he's old. Aegon asks if he has a better suggestion. Lord Weil explains to Aegon that his Lord Uncle Ormond marches from Old Town with a great host, and that his brother Darren's dragon is nearly at fighting age, and that he should call upon them to suppress the unrest in the Riverlands. Aegon explains that the Hightower army is months away. Then Lord Tywin explains that his brother Jason is raising a great army at Casterly Rock, and that in a matter of weeks he will be able to harass the Blackwoods from the west. Now, Grand Maester Orwell suggests that they unite the armies and strike as one, which caused argument amongst the lords, eventually making Alicent, feel the need to chastise them. So Criston explains that the Riverlands are the key to the war and that Harrenhal is the key to the Riverlands. He further explains that he will raise a small force and ride out. Alicent explains that he needs time to raise a large enough army to accomplish his goal. He then explains to Alicent that speed will be his ally and that he will turn the Crown Land houses that once favored Rhaenyra to their cause and add their men to his number as he moves along, and then he will turn west, where he plans to enlist the Brackens, subdue the Riverlands, and ultimately take Harrenhal. Alicent explains that Sir Criston is being impatient to ride with so few men, that his scheme is too bold, and that he is likely to be defeated by the first stronghold that he should encounter. But Sir Criston is determined. He turns to Aegon and asks his opinion on the plan. Aegon asks if he will take Aemon and Vhagar, but Sir Criston tells him that Aemon and Vhagar must stay behind to protect the city. Remember that. Aegon thinks briefly before saying, "Good, to war then." He then suggests that he will accompany Sir Criston on Sunfire, to which Sir Criston responds by telling him that the king that his plan is not to draw attention. And Aegon asks what he will do should he encounter one or more of Rhaenyra's dragons. So Criston tells Aegon that he is much more likely to encounter one of Rhaenyra's dragons if they bring one of their own. Aemon then explains that the Greens cannot risk the king's loss, so he must stay behind. Aegon tells Aemon that he is as fearsome as any of them, before we cut to the next scene. And, this is a conversation that I found to be interesting for a few reasons. One, you see Alicent in the small council meeting trying to argue with actual experienced warrior and Sir Criston about battle tactics when she's never so much as picked up a sword. Well, a blade, but not a sword, right? And I think this had a lot to do with the fact that they were boning and now maybe they're not. Mostly because she sees Sir Criston as the reason her father was sent away. And she knows that, he now has more power than she does. I think she also recognizes that Sir Otto was definitely going to be needed in the months, maybe even the years to come, to see them through this conflict. And I think before Alicent controls she and Sir Criston's interactions, she seems to be the one who decided when, where, and how the pair engaged in adult activities. But now that Sir Criston is hand of the king, he wields considerably more power than she does as the Queen Dowager, and I think she's a little butthurt about it. The other thing we see here is that Aegon is desperate to prove himself worthy of the responsibility thrust upon him, almost as if he's trying to prove to his deceased father that he's capable. But I think in his being so thirsty for approval, he's listening to the wrong voices. And with him expelling the most politically capable man, maybe in all of Westeros, with him having served 3 kings, including Aegon himself, though for a brief time, he has created a scenario by where winning the war against Rhaenyra will be much, much more difficult. Anyway, next we see Mysaria at Dragonstone, watching sea smoke flying in the distance as Rhaenyra approaches. She thanks Mysaria for saving her life by warning Rhaenyra's guards about Sir Eric, with an A. Mysaria asks what the life of a queen is worth, and Rhaenyra seems taken aback by the fact that Mysaria seems to be seeking reward for her actions. Mysaria goes on to ask Rhaenyra for a place in her court. Mysaria then tells Rhaenyra she showed her grace by releasing her from captivity, and that she was indeed surprised by that. She also tells Rhaenyra that she knows the workings of the Red Keep and the movements of those who serve there, and that she wishes to get revenge against the Hightowers for what they did to her, that being burning her house down, among other things. She also says that she knows that the common people of King's Landing will either be ruled by Rhaenyra or the usurper, and that only Rhaenyra has shown herself to be merciful. Rhaenyra warns Mysaria that she should not confuse mercy with pliancy. And at that moment, Seasmoke cries out. Mysaria asks Rhaenyra if the dragons are always like that, and Rhaenyra tells her that sometimes the dragons grow restless and that they cannot know why. Mysaria tells Rhaenyra that perhaps the dragon is lonely, and Rhaenyra seems to take what is said there to heart. This scene is basically Mysaria choosing a side in the war to come rather than fleeing Westeros like she told Rhaenyra she wanted to do last episode. And Mysaria, reminds me a lot of Lord Varys from Game of Thrones. He had a large network of spies, not just in the Red Keep, but all over the known world. So he was a little deeper in the streets than Mysaria might be, and that she has been here in House of the Dragon. But he was also a champion of the people, which Mysaria seems to be as well. And Mysaria has planted herself at Rhaenyra's side, it seems, by explaining to Rhaenyra her value as a spy. She also gives Rhaenyra the thought, it seems, of finding riders for the dragons who have none at the moment, which is where I'm sure the dragon seeds will come in future episodes. In the next scene, we see Rhaenyra meeting with Rhaena and telling her that she will be sending her son, Joffrey, to ward, along with the dragon, with Rhaenyra's cousin, the Lady Jane Arryn, in the Vale. That she has pledged her army in exchange for a dragon, and that she will be going with them for her safety. She also tells her that she must take Aegon III and Viserys II for even further, maybe even to Pentos. And this is basically Rhaenyra's response to Sir Eric with an A, attacking her after the whole blood and cheese situation. She's trying to make sure all of her small children get to keep their heads, with how close in proximity King's Landing and Dragonstone actually are. But, Rhaena doesn't want to do it, and you can see it in her face. And I think this is because she feels useless due to the fact that she doesn't have a dragon. Remember back in season 1, she had plans to claim Vhagar, but Aemon got to her first, and that caused the scrap where Aemon lost his eye. And with everything going on, I think Rhaenyra really wants, Rhaena, really wants to be part of the action, especially since Baela will get to stay close to the Dragonstone and participate more directly in the conflict, at least for now. And you can plainly see that Rhaena doesn't like being sent away, but ultimately she agrees because, what else is she going to do, right? Her queen asked her to do something, you do it, especially when that queen is your family. So in the next scene, we see Daemon arrive at Harrenhal on the back of Caraxes. He makes his way carefully through the gloomy, seemingly empty castle as the rain comes down heavily, until finally he finds the feasting hall occupied by Simon Strong and a handful of others. Upon entering the hall, Daemon makes it clear that he claims Harrenhal, to which Sir Simon, replies, apparently so. Simon Strong then rises from his chair and approaches Daemon's position, bowing before him, pledging his fealty to Rhaenyra, as we see Alice Rivers enter the hall and look upon Daemon before Sir Simon invites Daemon to join them for supper. Now, as Daemon sits across from the handful of strong men, he questions them about their loyalty, refusing to eat, suggesting that the meal they prepared for him may be poisoned. Now, Sir Simon tries to assure Daemon that his presence is indeed welcome, but Daemon brings up the fact that Lord Larys Strong resides in King's Landing and has apparently sided with the Greens. So Sir Simon rejects Larys as his lord, claiming that he remains the prime suspect in the murders of both Lord Lionel Strong and Sir Harwin Strong. And he insists to the prince that he and his men will back Rhaenyra. But Daemon immediately corrects him, demanding to be referred to as Your Grace. And this was interesting because we see that despite the fact that no one else does, Daemon sees himself as a king, not just a king consort. And this is the main problem that he and Rhaenyra have at the moment. Viserys did all that he could to keep Daemon from power. This much is true, including naming Rhaenyra his heir. But when Rhaenyra sent Laenor away and married Daemon, she undid all of Viserys' effort to protect the throne and the realm from Daemon's power in one fell swoop. And this is the result, a man who married the female heir to the Iron Throne of Westeros, placing himself maybe closer to the Iron Throne than he's ever been before. And one could argue that's why he played the games with Rhaenyra in the first season. Once he was disowned and sent away by Viserys, he knew the easiest way to come back into power was through Rhaenyra. So he seduced her in the hopes that he could manipulate her as queen to do his bidding instead of him being there to do hers. Anyway, Sir Simon apologizes, assuming that Daemon was simply there as a king consort. But Daemon's response is basically, you know what happens when you assume, right? And you can tell Sir Simon is afraid of Daemon because it's getting downright awkward at dinner. Them peas getting cold. And you wonder if Daemon is going to continue to be a problem for Rhaenyra as the actual war draws closer. But after Sir Simon asks Daemon why he has come, Daemon explains that Harrenhal is the largest castle in Westeros. But Sir Simon explains that the castle is in great disrepair. Daemon suggests the castle be repaired. Sir Simon tells Daemon that they haven't the coin for such an undertaking and then asks what purpose would they repair the castle even if they did. Daemon explains that there are approximately 40,000 swords in the Riverlands, the largest undeclared host in the realm, and that only Harrenhal is large enough to garrison them. So Sir Simon then informs Daemon that a large number of the houses in the Riverlands have now indeed declared and are presently at war. And again, he's speaking of the Battle of Burning Mill. So you see, throughout most of the realm, it seems, or at least the southern part of Westeros, people already think the war started. But, Sir Simon goes on to tell Daemon that House Bracken and Blackwood have long since detested one another. When Daemon asks why, Sir Simon says the answer to that is lost in time. So it's been a long time. And, Daemon then commands Sir Simon to summon his Lord Paramount so that he may treat with him and turn him to his side. Sir Simon informs Daemon that Lord Glover grows frail in his old age and that his grip on his bannermen is weak, and they feel that they can do as they like. Now, Daemon insists that he will speak to him anyway and that people should obey their liege lord no matter his condition. He goes on to tell Sir Simon that perhaps the presence of the crown and a dragon will help sharpen minds in the Riverlands. Now, Sir Simon asked Daemon if he is successful at convincing the lords of the Riverlands to join the side of the blacks, what he will do next. And Daemon tells him that they will march on King's Landing and take the throne, which seems to surprise Sir Simon. And again, the writers are presenting Daemon's actions as though he may be trying to raise his own army consisting of the houses of the Riverlands in an attempt to claim the throne for himself. Plus, that in this whole conversation, Daemon doesn't mention Rhaenyra once. This whole back and forth makes me think that Daemon's plan is to maybe even do away with Lord Grover Tully, or maybe just scaring him into abdicating his title and make himself Lord Paramount of the Riverlands and march on King's Landing. And I really think that if he is able to do that, you would certainly have to wonder if he might steal the throne right from under Rhaenyra and name himself king of Westeros. Now, next we see Sir Criston and his men preparing to depart King's Landing. And upon exiting the Red Keep, we see Alicent talking to her brother, Sir Gawain Hightower. Now, remember, we saw Sir Gawain in the pilot episode at the Heirs Tournament. He was chosen by Daemon as an insult to Sir Otto, and Sir Gawain was getting the better of Daemon during their joust, but on the second pass, Daemon aimed his lance low, knocking Sir Gawain from his horse and injuring his face a bit, though it seems he is healed quite nicely. Anyway, Sir Gawain was asked to come by Alicent to accompany Sir Criston to Harrenhal. And upon their meeting, he expresses his surprise that his father was dismissed as Hand of the King and that Sir Criston has been awarded the post in his absence. Sir Criston clearly doesn't want to take Sir Gawain with him, but Alicent insists. He tells Sir Gawain that the march will be hard, but Sir Gawain tells him that he looks forward to marching to war with the Dornishmen. And that seems to be another dig. He says goodbye to his sister before leaving them. Alicent half-heartedly blesses Sir Criston's endeavor before Sir Criston responds by asking for her favor. And see, this is what happens when hookup culture comes to Westeros, right? Somebody needs to get a mop because these two are a mess, a complete mess. Anyway, after the scene from the Real Housewives of Westeros, Sir Criston and Sir Gawain mount their horses and the group rides off. And as the camera pans upward, we see that the rat catchers are still hanging outside the walls of the Red Keep. Like, this is not sanitary, but I guess, Aegon got to do what Aegon got to do, right? Aegon gonna Aegon, right? So next we see Rhaenyra and her Black Council. Rhaenys returns from her patrol reporting that there's still been no sightings of the Greens, no men, no horses, no ships, and no dragons. Now, Sir Alfred Broom then suggests that the Blacks make a move before the Greens do. He claims that the enemy has penetrated his castle walls and that the Riverlands is aflame after the Battle of the Burning Mill. So again, you have people in the South claiming that the war has already started. He then asks how Daemon is doing securing their army at Harrenhal. And Maester Girardi's answers that there has been no word as of yet. Now, Lord Massey explains that they must press their advantage, that being the number of dragons on their side. He suggests sending them all out and turning green strongholds to their cause and burning those who resist. Rhaenyra rejects that idea, stating that if dragons begin fighting dragons, that they invite their own destruction. So she goes on to explain that the fear of dragons in itself a weapon, is in of itself a weapon, and that the Greens will make that calculation as well. Lord Massey laughs, which seems to annoy Rhaenyra, before he responds that the value of a sword is not in its when it is scabbard, meaning when it is sheathed, basically. So you got to pull it out to scare people, right? Rhaenyra proclaims that the Blacks will achieve victory with armies, not with dragons alone. That the Vale in the North will send men, that they just need to give Daemon time. The Lords explain that with Daemon away and Aegon's factions enraged after the death of his son, that Rhaenyra has never been more exposed. And Lord Baltimus of Claw Isle suggests that it might be time for Rhaenyra to get herself someplace safe and allow the lords on her council to remain as a distraction of sorts. Rhaenyra asked Lord Celtigar if he would conduct the war in her absence, and he claims it would simply be a precaution. Rhaenyra declares it treason and states the lords are lucky that they took their thoughts no further before she stands and exits the room. Rhaenys then stands and tells the lords that Rhaenyra wears the crown of Jaehaerys the Conciliator, her grandsire, the wisest of Targaryen kings whose reign lasted longer than any, even Aegon the Conqueror. Whatever the hell that means at this point. And as you can see from this conversation, the men don't truly believe in Rhaenyra as someone who can win this war. And they likely sided with her based solely on the fact that they swore obeisance to her under her father's reign, and or because the blacks have more dragons than do the greens. Because at every turn, the lords on Rhaenyra's council are basically telling her to move out the way and let men do men's work. Anyway, outside near the docks, Rhaenys and Corlys talk about how things are going. Rhaenys tells him that Rhaenyra's counsel has wavered and that she hopes Rhaenyra is up to the task of what will come next. She then tells Corlys that she said goodbye to Rhaena before she left. Corlys wishes Rhaena well, stating that he would fight 100 battles before he would go into exile with nothing but, as he put it, cackling babes. Rhaenys reminds him that one of those babes is his heir. Corlys laments that Joffrey is a 6-year-old boy who knows nothing of the sea, and yet somehow is the next Lord of the Tides. Rhaenys tells Corlys that it would not displease Rhaenyra or the gods if Rhaena were named the heir to Driftmark. Corlys doesn't seem to like that idea, but Rhaenys explains that it must be one or the other. Corlys responds by telling Rhaenys that they must hope to see their way forward in time. Rhaenys reminds Corlys that there is no time, that they are at war, and that something could befall him at any time. Corlys then simply responds, "Then it is well that I am a good sailor." He then kisses his wife on the hand and goes back to repairing the ship. Now, this, I think, is the writers clearing the way for something that happens in the book, and that is Adam Valerian, born Adam of Hull, who will likely become a legitimized bastard from Driftmark and of dragon seed descent. And in the books, from what I understand, during the Dance of the Dragons, Adam became a knight and the heir to the House Valerian of Driftmark. And again, he was also a dragon rider whose dragon ended up being Sea Smoke. So next we see Rhaenyra seeing her children off. She tells Rhaena that she cannot spare fighting dragons, but that she will send what she can. She also reminds Rhaena to remind Lady Jane of her pledge and persuade her of the urgency of their need. Baela then approaches and bids her sister safe travels. Rhaena seems angry still and responds that she will be safe enough, far from any danger with only babes to nursemaid. Now, Baela reminds her sister that she is doing Rhaenyra a great service and might yet find herself glad to be out of danger, but Rhaena is in no mood to be coddled. Baela and Rhaena rejoin Rhaenyra, who is loading dragon eggs into a crate, and she tells Rhaena that Tyraxes and Stormcloud are both small and vulnerable, and that the eggs in the crate are even more fragile. But that if things go to ruin for them, that it is Rhaena who will bear their hope for the future. And we see Rhaena's expression change a bit as she realizes that she may have the most important job of everyone, the continuation of House Targaryen should everything go to crap. Rhaenyra hugs her small children and the sisters say their goodbyes, then the group departs for the Vale. And I've seen people saying that the eggs in the crate are Drogon, Viserion, and Rhaegal, Daenerys' dragons. Now, there are 4 eggs in the crate, but, Rhaenyra has promised her cousin a dragon, so maybe one of the eggs goes to her cousin, and then the other 3 are indeed Daenerys' dragon eggs. So if they are Dany's eggs, though, there's an extra one, and so we'll just kind of have to see, what the writers do in that particular instance. Anyway, next we see Alicent and Helaena back in King's Landing, and the handmaids take Jaehaera. And Helaena then tells Alicent that she feels sad about Jaehaerys, but that she shouldn't because people die all the time, especially babies. Alicent tells Helaena that sadness is a condition of motherhood. Helaena states that she realized during the funeral procession for Jaehaerys that she had no more right to grief than the common people do, as they must lose their children all the time. Alicent reminds Helaena that the stranger comes for them all, and that Helaena has as much right to grief as anyone. Helaena then asks, well, what about you? And Alicent tells her that she loved Jaehaerys, but that her main concern was what Helaena herself was going through. She then attempts to apologize to Helaena, but is cut off by her as she states simply, I forgive you. And this is the writers nodding to the fact that Helaena is prophetic, that she can see things before they happen. So she knows what her mother is going to say, and she knows why she's saying it. This is also Alicent still believing that Jaehaerys died because her and Sir Criston were knocking boots outside of wedlock. I've already stated my thoughts about this line of thinking in an earlier breakdown video, so I won't go back into that here. Anyway, from there, we see Aegon getting fitted for armor as his new Kingsguard hypes him up. And then just then Lord Larys appears, telling one of the guards that there are rumors that the king is ready to fly off to war. The guard asks, what is it to you? And Lord Larys explains that he thinks it would be beneficial to all in King's Landing to prevent their king from being brutally slain by their enemies and his body parts scattered to beasts and his court come to ruin before walking past the guard and entering the room. Now, once inside, he compliments the king's armor before asking that the room be cleared. He goes on to tell Aegon that there are rumors that he was outwitted by his council and that they have convinced him to go off to war so that Queen Alicent may rule in his stead with Prince Aemon at her side, which seems to bother him. He asks who spreads these rumors, but Larys does not tell him specifically. He tells him instead that it does not matter, that they are weeds unless they are tended. Aegon then tells him to go to tend to them then. And as Larys leaves, he is stopped once more and officially named Aegon's Master of Whispers. And you see that Larys can play Aegon like a fiddle. He can get him to do anything he wants. And he's been doing it since the season started. Now, he did it last season a bit with Alicent. I think he's one of the most dangerous men in the realm, and he can't even fight. And here, he basically convinces Aegon to stay out without so much as an argument. So I wonder what his next trick will be. But after Larys exits, Aegon's new Kingsguardmen, his homeboys, ask if he would like to be escorted to the Dragon Pit. Aegon tells him that perhaps he shall fly out another day. And the guards all agree with his choice, then they invite the king to come out with them. And it's made clear that Sir Martin has a squire that has never had a woman, implying that they might be trying to remedy that fact. Aegon reminds them that members of the Kingsguard, they are now sworn to chastity, and they all laugh in response. But Aegon seems not to know how to feel about the way in which his friends are approaching their new post. Excuse me. And this part of the scene, along with some earlier ones in this episode, just shows us that Aegon's new Kingsguard don't take their job seriously at all. And I think, if the time should ever come where they actually have to draw their swords and defend their king, that my man Aegon is going to find himself in a spot of trouble. Now next, we see a man walk into a tavern and claim to be the son of Balon the Brave. Ulf, a self-professed dragon seed and alleged half-brother of King Viserys I and Prince Daemon Targaryen, uncle to Rhaenyra. And it feels like in this scene, he's saying all this to simply get free drinks, though I'm not sure he would risk it in a King's Landing where Aegon sits the throne, but he does it nonetheless. Now, in the book, it turns out that Ulf is indeed a dragon seed. However, I'm not quite sure what his dragon seed status here in House of the Dragon will ultimately wind up being. But as this conversation wears on, Aegon enters the tavern with his homeboys. And as everyone stands, Ulf shouts, "All hail the king," and everyone answers the same. Aegon then offers to buy a round for everyone, which the drunks of King Landing seem to appreciate greatly. Now, next, Aegon and the boys enter a brothel, half in the bag, and Aegon begins pulling back the curtains of private rooms, apparently looking for the brothel matter, so as to buy her for Sir Martin the Squire. But when they finally find her, she's with Aemon, naked and curled up in a ball. And Aegon, upon seeing this, he laughs hysterically, making fun of his brother until Aemon finally stands naked and leaves the room. And I think this is Aegon making fun of his brother because it's the only way he can feel superior to him at the moment, because he knows that Aemon is regarded as a true warrior and he is not. And that's why he's trying to always overcompensate. I think that's why he's so eager to fly off to war, to prove himself, fearsome as any of them. It appears that Aegon is becoming more and more self-aware by the day, realizing that he might just be a pretender. And this makes him impetuous and reckless in his decision-making, something that Otto has already told him, and I'm sure his insecurities will wind up costing him dearly in the episodes to come. Now, I also don't know why we had to see Aemon's penis in this scene, but I digress. In the next scene, we see a Rhaenyra in her quarters going through her mail. And, she finally reads Alicent's scroll. So after that, we see Sir Gawain and some of his men riding through an open field on their way to an inn. As Sir Criston catches up to them, he stops them and informs them that the company has made camp back a ways. And Sir Gawain remarks that he doesn't want to sleep on the cold, hard ground, and that is why they make for the Bull, a tavern with an excellent reputation on the Rosby Road. I don't know why he's talking about he don't want to sleep on the ground because, Sir Kristen told him that the march was going to be hard before they left. But anyway, Sir Kristen reminds Sir Gawain that they marched to make the first strike in the name of his grace. Sir Gawain doesn't believe his nephew, the king, would begrudge him a night of comfort before doing so, and he agrees to meet the army at first light, or if the inn has good wine, a little after first light. At that moment, something in the sky catches Sir Kristen's attention. He tells the men that they're exposed, and he orders them towards a tree line nearby. Now, in the sky, we see Baela riding Moondancer, and I like the way Moondancer looks. I think that's the best looking dragon of them all, if you ask me. But she sees the men on horseback and she dives down after them. And the men make it to the tree line just in time, forcing Baela and Moondancer back up into the sky. But she circles the area, looking for signs of them before she finally heads back off. In the woods, Sir Gawain thanks Sir Kristen for saving his life, and Sir Kristen tells the men that now that the blacks know they're abroad, that they'll be hunting. He tells them that the army must move under the trees and by cover or dark, and last but not least, he makes it absolutely clear that they will not be staying at any inns. And this scene is here for two reasons. One, to move the story forward towards the impending face-off between the two sides at Rook's Rest, as Baela will certainly head back to Dragonstone and report what she has seen, that the Greens are finally on the move, and two, to create the circumstances by which Sir Gawain decides to cut the bullshit over his dad's firing his hand to the king and fall in line behind Sir Kristen as the head of their army. So back on Dragonstone, we do indeed see Baela telling Rhaenyra what she saw, and that she saw Sir Kristen and about half a dozen other knights, and she believes them to be scouts for a larger force. Now, Maester Gerardus confirms that he received word from Lord Ferring that a large army is indeed moving north towards Rosby. Rhaenyra asked Baela if she could be certain that it was Sir Kristen, and she says yes, because she didn't just stay up in the sky. She actually pursued them for a bit, but that she didn't engage as she was instructed. Lord Bartimus implores that Rhaenyra take action. Lord Staunton asks if he might return home to Rook's Rest in order to fortify his lands, which she grants. Lord Gorman makes the point that the army is likely headed for Harrenhal, and Sir Broom claims that because of that fact, that it is Sir Daemon who should be worried. Rhaenyra reminds the council that Daemon has Caraxes. Lord Bartimus explains that Cole will be looking to increase his number as they move throughout the Riverlands, and that he will have the ability to call upon the dragon of his own. Sir Broom then begs Rhaenyra to loose the dragons, root Cole out, and burn him. Now, young Jacaerys and Lady Baela look to Rhaenyra as she ponders the choice in front of her, as the other lords do the same, because Jacaerys has been wanting to fight, since his brother. Now, Rhaenyra looks to Rhaenys, who simply stares back at her, awaiting her next instructions, before finally stating that, she has heard her lord's arguments and that she will consider them. Now, from there, we find Daemon chilling at Harrenhal, watching Netflix, when he starts to hallucinate or dream, however you want to put it. I say hallucinate as he is wide awake, it appears. Anyway, someone attempts to open the door to his chambers, but the door has been barred by Daemon with a sword. Now, he draws Dark's sister and opens the door to find no one there. He then hears singing in a nearby room. He follows the sound, opening the door to find a young Rhaenyra singing as she sews young Jaehaerys' head back onto his shoulders. She says to him, "Always coming and going, aren't you? And I have to clean up afterwards." She continues singing and sewing until Daemon, finally drops his sword, now finding himself outside in front of a weirwood tree. He turns to find Alice Rivers standing behind him, and she says simply, "You will die in this place." Now, it is said that Harrenhal has a sort of supernatural property, as does the God's Eye, the lake nearby. Combine that with the mystical abilities of Alice Rivers, who is the bastard daughter of House Strong, and a wet nurse at Harrenhal. And this is why Daemon is having these visions. Now, George R.R. Martin describes Alice as a witch. It's not a witch in the sense that she casts spells, but she does work with potions and medicines of the abnormal variety and sees visions in a manner similar to like Helena or Melisandre from Game of Thrones. And spoiler alert, from what I understand, Daemon does in fact die at the God's Eye in a fight with Aemon. So we'll just have to see if that's what happens in the TV show. But back on Dragonstone, we see Rhaenyra approach Mysaria and ask what she knows about the movements of Alicent. Mysaria asks if she would take her hostage or kill her. Rhaenyra says that she would speak with her. Mysaria remarks that killing her would be easier. Rhaenyra explains to Mysaria that if war can be averted, that it's her duty to see it done, and that she believes Alicent to be of the same opinion because she sent Rhaenyra a raven expressing her remorse for all that has happened. Mysaria tells Rhaenyra that she can have a message sent to Alicent, but Rhaenyra tells Mysaria that she would be very, very wary to accept it, likely to believe it to be some sort of subterfuge, as would she if the roles were reversed. She tells Mysaria that she must see her in person. Mysaria reminds Rhaenyra that Alicent is the Queen Dowager and that she always has many eyes watching her. She then tells Rhaenyra that there's one place that Alicent goes outside the castle walls where she may be found alone. So next, we see Rhaenyra arrive in King's Landing by boat. She's on a boat, dressed as a Septa, and she makes her way to the Grand Sept where she follows Alicent inside. And man, haven't we seen this before, right? Everybody's sneaking into King's Landing, bro. And as Alicent kneels before the altar covered in burning candles, Rhaenyra appears next to her, pulling a knife from her robe to Alicent's shock, demanding to speak with her. Alicent asks, what if she should cry out? And Rhaenyra responds that her knights would find her and that she would be taken and that she would be slain, but not before she killed her. Alicent scoffs before asking, and then what? To which Rhaenyra simply admits that she has begun the conversation poorly. Anyway, Rhaenyra starts again, reminding Alicent that they watched the tourney together the day her brother was born, that they knew even then that men trained for battle are eager to fight, to seek blood and glory. But she knows that Alicent does not have that desire. She goes on to tell Alicent that Rhaenys has counseled her that she has seen in Alicent a wish to avert the worst of what may come. Alicent looks at her and asks if she's come to surrender then. Rhaenyra responds, saying that she has come to see if they may uncover some path towards peace. She tells Alicent that her dragons are restless, that they smell battle, but Alicent interrupts her, telling her that there will be no terms after all that has happened, that she has no army after people heard of what she did, meaning the death of her grandson. Rhaenyra responds, claiming that the trespass was not hers. She then claims that she is a mother too, and that Alicent has yet to answer for the murder of her son. Alicent tells her that she repudiated that with all of her heart. Rhaenyra scoffs as she accuses Alicent of trying to usurp her rightful inheritance. Alicent then tells Rhaenyra that Viserys changed his mind. Now, Rhaenyra doesn't believe her at first, but then Alicent swears on her dead mother's remains and reminds Rhaenyra that she may have been unkind to her at times, but never untrue. And I ain't gonna lie, I thought that was funny because that's a callback to Rhaenyra swearing on her mother that nothing was going on with her and Daemon back when Alicent asked her if she was in a pleasure house with him back in season 1. But Alicent goes on to tell Rhaenyra that Viserys mentioned Aegon on his deathbed and the prince that was promised. And it's at that point that Rhaenyra tells Alicent that it's just a story, at which, the Song of Ice and Fire, at which point Alicent looks as though she may have indeed come to the realization that she simply misunderstood what Viserys meant by his words. Alicent pauses and thinks for a moment, but then tells Rhaenyra that she must go before she is discovered. Rhaenyra tells Alicent that a grave mistake has been made, and that a terrible war is leering, and that even victory may become so bloody that it could be counted as a loss. And Alicent insists that there has been no mistake. She tells Rhaenyra that her father has gone from court, that Cole is on the march, and that, Aemond, well, you know what he is. That's kind of messed up. I guess she called her son a monster. But she ends the conversation by explaining to Rhaenyra that it is too late before she gets up and hurries away, and the episode cuts to black. And, this scene really cheesed me off, I gotta say, really and truly. Because in this scene, it becomes clear to me what the writer's intentions truly are with this story. They intend to lay the fault of the Targaryen Civil War completely at the feet of Alicent Hightower, positioning her as the villain of this story in an effort to position Rhaenyra as its hero. But this isn't the case because in this story, there is no hero to be had. I want to say that again. Nobody's a hero. That's the whole effing point of the story. And last season, the writers looked like they were setting this fight up as a comedy of errors. That I didn't necessarily love, but that I could have lived with. Most of what has happened to create space between the greens and the blacks could have been chalked up to accidents and misunderstandings. But, as I've said before, I'm Team Green, and the main reason, is that Team Green has been reactionary in all of this. They have not been the aggressors. Team Green has always made decisions based on decisions that were made by Rhaenyra, Viserys, or other people that have now chosen to take up the side of the blacks. And I'll never hold somebody responsible for responding in kind to what is being done to them. Remember, Luke takes Aemon's eye, but he was just a kid. Who could really blame him for such a mistake? Alicent misunderstands Viserys' last words, a completely understandable error, what with her son's name being Aegon as well. Then Aemon kills Luke, but it was an accident. Arax attacked Vhagar, and Vhagar took umbrage despite Aemon's commands for her to stop. Rhaenyra demands Aemon's head as recompense for her son's death, but Daemon goes rogue and she gets Jaehaerys' head instead, not Rhaenyra's doing. But now, Alicent has not only been given context for what she heard Viserys say on his deathbed, but she refuses to do anything about it, which sets the stage for Alicent to take the blame for whatever happens next. And it makes Rhaenyra no longer responsible for whatever happens next. And I think that's BS. Now, season 2 of this series has meandered quite a bit to this point, and you can really feel it when you juxtapose it with season 1. Season 1 moved at breakneck speed, with literal years passing between some of the episodes. And I understand why the showrunners and the writers did that. They didn't think the audience would sit still through multiple seasons of waiting for the Dance of the Dragons to begin. And I'll admit to you that it would have been frustrating to wait to see the dance until season 3. But just from a writing perspective, I would have stretched the first half of season 1 to 10 episodes, creating its own season. And then I would have come back and done the same thing with the second half of season 1, making that season 2. And then finally, I would have made what we're watching now season 3. Again, merely for the purposes of a cleaner narrative path. I understand it might not be as exciting a watch, but the way that I see it, House of the Dragon is the most popular show on television right now. So people would have just waited. But the writers and the showrunners did not do that. And I wondered what would happen when the show was finally forced to slow down. And what we've had to this point is a plot that is moving in circles. Lucerys dies and Rhaenyra mourns him. Then Daemon sneaks into King's Landing and have Blood and Cheese sneak into the Red Keep and kill young Jaehaerys. Then Sir Criston has Sir Eric, with an A, sneak onto Dragonstone to kill Rhaenyra, but he is killed by his brother instead. Then Rhaenyra sneaks into King's Landing dressed as a Septa and threatens Alicent in order to enlist her in a plan to stop the war before it starts, with no success. That's 3 episodes in a row that are just people sneaking into places they shouldn't be able to sneak into and people having uncomfortable conversations in private rooms. Everybody needs new security at this point, like dead ass. The only saving grace is that we want to see the dragons go to war so badly that we just sit through it and wait for the payoff. And that's how I know people would have sat through 2 seasons with no dragons going to war. Because we're basically waiting and waiting and waiting already here in season 2. And, hopefully episode 4, which looks like it will actually feature the Battle of Rook's Rest, will be worth it. And we'll finally get to see the next major domino in the Targaryen Civil War fall. Spoiler alert, that being Rhaenys and Meleys. And speaking of falling dominoes, I want people to understand something really, really, really clearly right now. That despite the writers trying their damnedest to elevate Rhaenyra to Daenerys status, Rhaenyra is no hero. Not even close. And if you are allowed to yourself to view her that way, you're setting yourself up for a King's Landing size letdown as this story continues, because whether you've read the book or not, you should know this story don't end well for her. It appears that 90% of the internet is Team Black, and I'm fine with that. Back whoever you want. But I see now that that's simply because the blacks have a better marketing department, despite the fact that in the actual story, their actual realm feels differently on the show. But again, I remind you that in this story, there are no heroes to be had, because the entire point of the story hinges upon the fact that the Dance of the Dragons is a little bit everyone's fault. Viserys for naming a girl as his heir and then remarrying and having 4 children thereafter with her best friend. Dragon dream or not, Rhaenyra for refusing to do anything she was asked to do by Viserys in order to prepare for her inheritance and a smooth transition of power, want to or not. Sir Otto for plotting a coup, even though he did it to try to make sure his family was going to be safe, but politics be damned. Young Lucerys for putting out Aemon's eye over a dragon that didn't even belong to Baelor or Rhaena. Just a kid or not. Aemon for killing Lucerys, accident or not. Alicent for crowning her son king, misunderstanding or not. Rhaenys getting the drop on the greens at the coronation and not pulling the trigger, want to or not. Daemon killing Jaehaerys, mistake or not. Do you see where I'm going here? Rhaenys has even said as much at the beginning part of this episode. Everyone shares some blame here. Everyone. And another spoiler alert, all the major players end up dead here, with no side really being able to claim victory. And even though things indeed end up being okay, some 200 years later, this colossal clusterfuck almost dooms Westeros to the very fate Rhaenyra was named heir by Viserys to avoid in the first place. But what do you guys think? Did you enjoy the third episode of the new season? What's your favorite storyline so far? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you that might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. Also, be sure to go and check out themaskscreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got to go take some medicine, and I got screenplays to write. I'll catch y'all on the next video.